right, let's go ahead and get started with this chapter 4 review. Now I am going to be jumping around on this page, so make sure that you're just kind of following along, taking notes off of the ones that I do complete. Okay, a couple of things that I want to point out first is this is the standard form of a quadratic. It's ax squared plus bx plus c. Okay, so if they say write something in standard form, it's going to have 3 terms at the end. The important parts of standard form are the a value, the b value, and the c value. Okay, if you don't see one of them, like if you see x squared but you don't see a, then a is 1. Okay, if you're completely missing the c term, then it would be 0. If you're completely missing the bx term, then that would be 0x, okay? But for now, just know that if a is not there in front of x squared, the a value is going to be 1. Okay? All right, we're going to be looking at 1a first. One of the things I want you to be able to do is identify if the graph opens up or down. So before we get started with anything, I want you to always make sure that our equation is all set on the same side of the equal sign. Okay, you don't want something on the right side and something on the left side. You want everything on the same side, right? Then we're going to take that and identify our a value, our b value, and our c value. In this case, a is a negative, which means it is -1. B is -4. And C is 12. And it's a positive 12, so I'm just going to put 12 there. Okay. All right. So now we're going to go ahead and determine whether it opens up or down. Well, the A value tells us whether it opens up or if it opens down. If A is positive, positive people smile. If A is negative, negative people frown. Okay. In this case, A is negative. So that means it's going to open down. Okay. Now, when you think about this as like a roller coaster, that it was increasing, increasing, increasing. Here's the turning point. At that turning point, is it a maximum or a minimum? Well, if it was a roller coaster and it gets to this highest point, that's called a maximum. The highest point that the roller coaster can go is the maximum height. Now I'm going to go look at 1b real quick. 1b, when I look at a here, a is 1, b is -2, and c is 1. Okay, looking at the a value to help me determine whether it's going to open up or down. A is positive, positive people smile. So on this one, if the roller coaster was dropping, it would hit this lowest point. And that lowest point is called a minimum. Okay. All right. Now, looking at the next part, if I want you to find the vertex is always an x and a y value. It's a very specific x and y value or coordinate, but we need to be able to find it. So to find the vertex for the x value, we are going to do opposite b over 2 times a. Okay. Once we find the x value, we are going to substitute it back into the equation. And we're going to find the value of y. So just take whatever x is, plug it back into the equation, and find y. All right, so let's first find this x value. So opposite b over 2a. So opposite b is +4 over 2 times the a value of -1. So that gives us 4 divided by -2 So that comes out to -2. That's the x value of the vertex. Okay. All right, to find the y value of the vertex, we're going to take -2 and substitute it back into the equation. So we have negative x squared minus 4x plus 12. And I didn't mean to put an x there. Negative 4x, then plus 12. Everywhere there was an x, we're going to put a -2. Everywhere there was an x, we're going to replace it with -2. This is helping us find our y value. -2 squared is 4. 4 times negative is -4. -4 times -2 is +8. And then +12. Simplify that further. -4 plus 8 is +4 plus 12, which gives me 16. Okay. So my vertex is -2, 16. Okay. All right. So that's the same thing you would do on 1B. Okay. All right. Now let's go down to 4A. 4A, this time they want us to write an equation in standard form. So that's where I have ax squared plus bx plus c with the given roots. Okay, a root is talking about what x equals. So here they've given us the roots -5, so x equals -5, and they've given us another root of x equals 8. Okay, now, before we can write this as an equation, remember I said we always want it set equal to 0 first. So I'm going to add 5 to both sides. So I will get x plus 5 equals 0. Then I'm going to subtract 8 from both sides. And I will have x minus 8 equals 0. Okay. All right, now I'm going to take that binomial of x plus 5 and x minus 8. So I have x plus 5 and x minus 8. All right. And now we are going to FOIL these, whether you like the area model or distribution or some other way that you can think of. That's what I want you to do. Okay, so we are going to have x times x gives me x squared. X times -8 is -8x. 5 times x is 5x. And 5 times -8 is -40. All right, once we FOIL it, we have to see if there's anything we can combine. In this case, we can combine these two because they both have x. And we have x squared minus 3x minus 40. Okay. All right, so that's what they want us to do if they wanted us to write it in standard form. Okay. All right. So that's the same thing that you have on 4B, so practice with that one. Okay. If I wanted to in this case, I could say A is 1, B is -3, and C is negative 40. So that's another way to check that it's in standard form. You're able to see the A, B, and C value. Okay? All right, let's look at, let's go to number 8A. Okay, this time they want you to solve it. So before we can solve, you always have to factor. So first things, let me try to list as steps. Set equal to 0. That's the first thing you want to do. The second thing you want to do is look for a GCF. Like, what can they all be divided by? What's the greatest common factor? Okay. Then the third thing you want to do is set the entire equation. Oh, well, if we set it equal to 0, it's already on one side. The next thing you want to do is then you want to factor it. That's the first thing you want to look for. And then the last thing you want to do after that is solve. Okay. All right. So first thing, set equal to 0. Well, this equation is not set equal to 0 because I have 10x squared on one side, 9x on the other side. So I'm going to subtract 9x from both sides and move it to the other side, to the left side. So I'm going to have 10x squared. Now it's a negative 9x equals 0. Okay. Now it says look for a GCF. Is there anything that these two terms have in common that we can factor out? They can both be divided by x. Okay, so since we can divide both of them by x, we have x. 10x squared divided by x is 10x. Negative 9x divided by x is negative 9 equals 0. Okay, so I set it equal to 0. I looked for a GCF, and now it says factor. Well, if you notice, when you took out that GCF, it's already factored because there's nothing that we can do to break that apart anymore. Okay, so these are the factors. So the first factor is x, and the second factor is 10x minus 9. Okay. Now I'm going to write a little bit more here on factor. I'm going to say factor by setting each one equal to 0. Okay. All right. So the x is going to be equal to 0. And then I'm going to ask myself, how can I get x by itself? Well, x is already by itself. So x equals 0 on that one. Okay. Now I also have to do 10x minus 9 is equal to 0. Add 9 to both sides. So then we have 10x equals positive 9. Divide both sides by 10. These cancel out. So we have x is equal to 9 over 10. Okay, those would be my two solutions when they ask me to solve it. Okay, all right, let's pick one more. Let's do number 9A. Okay. Now this one they want me to solve. So first thing, set it equal to 0. Okay. All right, so I'm going to move this negative 8 to the other side, and it'll become a positive 8. So I have x squared minus 6x plus 8 equals 0. Okay. See if there's a GCF. Well, there's nothing that they can all be divided by. So there's no GCF. Then we're going to factor this. Okay, now when I factor this, this is when I use that diamond that we talked about. Okay, what two values multiply to a times c and add to b? Well, in this case, a times c, again, if it helps, write it out. A is 1, b is -6, and c is 8. So a times c. So what multiplies to 8 but adds to -6? Okay. When I figure out those factors, I think of 4 and 2. And then I think, well, one of them's got to be negative, or if it's positive, both of them have to be negative, because a negative times a negative makes a positive. So I have -4 and -2. -4 times -2 makes 8, and then they add up to -6. Okay. This is the important part here. We're going to rewrite the equation, but instead of -6x, I am going to replace it with -4x and -2x, because those combined still make -6x. Okay, so rewriting the equation, so I have x squared. Okay, instead of that -6x, I'm going to do -4x minus 2x, and then I keep this last value. So I kept x squared, and I keep +8. Okay, this is all that factoring. Now that I have that, I put parentheses around the first two terms, parentheses around the last two terms. Remember that these two binomials were always being added. Look at the first group. What do they have in common? So x squared minus 4x, they can both be divided by x. So the x comes out front, and I'm left with x minus 4. Looking at the second group, they can both be divided by 2. Okay, so -2 divided by 2 would give me -x, but I want it to be a positive x so that it matches this one. So I'm actually going to factor out a -2. -2x divided by -2 leaves me with x. And then I get -4, because 8 divided by -2. Now at this point, make sure that the insides match. They have to match, or we can't move forward. We have to go back to see what else we could still do if they don't match. So the insides match. So I'm going to write them down as my first binomial. Then we look at the outsides, which is x minus 2. That becomes my second binomial. Key word here, they asked us to solve. So whenever they ask us to solve, my fourth step is solve by setting each one equal to 0. Oh, that's where I put the factor at. That's actually the solving part. By setting each one equal to 0. That's the solving part. So I'm going to have x minus 4 equals 0. And I'm going to have x minus 2 equals 0. X minus 4 equals 0. I have to move the -4 to the other side so that I get x equals +4. This one moved -2 over to the other side, so I get x equals +2. So to solve it, I have 4, 0, and 2, 0. Okay? So if they just asked me to factor, I could stop right here. Okay? But when they ask me to solve, I have to continue on until I get this. Okay? All right, now I'm going to go down to 10a. And I'm actually going to change the number for the sake of this example. So I'm going to scratch this off. And I am going to do -27. Okay, remember that whenever we have this is like -1 times 27. 27 can still be broken up, so I have -1 times radical 9 times radical 3. Okay. When I look at this, I can see that this one here is a perfect square. This one here has a negative under the radical. Okay, so a negative under the radical is always going to be I. Okay. Square root of 9 is 3. And then there is no square root to radical 3, so that just stays under radical 3. Okay. The correct way to write it, though, is that we have the number before the I. And then whatever's still under the radical, like a remainder, it goes at the very end. All right. Now, let's see. I want to look at the difference between 11b and 12b. Okay. Even if the numbers were the same, what's different? Well, the thing that's different is in 11b, the parentheses are touching, so that means they're being multiplied. And 12b, the parentheses are not touching because they have a subtraction sign in the middle. Okay? So we need to look at how to solve these two. So 11b, when you're being multiplied, they are being FOILed. So 6 times 6, that's 36. 6 times 4i is positive 24i. Negative 4i times 6. And then last one, negative 4i times positive 4i gives me negative 16i squared. Okay. So let's see what we can simplify. We have 36. These two here would cancel out. So I have 36 minus and I squared always turns into -1. Okay, so if you didn't see my notes up here, make sure you highlight these things here because they are important to the test. Okay, all right. So then I have 36. Negative times a negative is a positive. Okay, so that gives me 52. All right. Now on number 12b, we're not multiplying, we're subtracting. So I'm going to take the 28 minus 10. Then I'm going to take negative 4i minus negative 30i. So it's already a minus. Now I got to put another negative 30i. Here we can combine these. 28 minus 10. That gives us 18. And a negative times a negative makes that a positive. So 4i, or negative 4i plus 30i is positive 26i. Okay, these two can't be combined because one has an I and one does not. All right, okay. Let's see, last one. Let's do Okay, on number 13, I'm going to scratch this out. And I am going to do I to the 26th. What's its value? Well, anytime we want to know these values, we need to know our rules for I that I have written here in the colored highlighter marks. Okay, so we need to know that I to the first is equal to the square root of -1. Okay, or just I is that. We need to know that I squared is equal to -1. I to the third is equal to -I. And I to the fourth is equal to 1. Okay. And then it just keeps repeating. So the cycle keeps repeating. So if I want I to the 26th, here's what I could do. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, 21, 22, 23, 24, 25, and 26. So if it lands on 26, your answer is going to be -1. Okay. And that is it for this review. I'm going to stop there. Make sure you practice a couple of these, and then I will see you tomorrow.